I've been collecting artifacts for about 30 years, and I got started in it because as a local man growing up in the area, there were a lot of artifact locations, particularly the famous Sandy Hill site in Dorchester County. And as a kid, I used to walk the shorelines and pick up artifacts, and thought that that was a neat connection to the past.
I started collecting when I was a young boy back in the 50s. My brother and I used to walk around the fields collecting arrowheads. My wife bought me a book on Indian axes, Midwest axes. So I started collecting Indian Midwest axes. I had one of the top collections of Midwest axes in the country.
How I got started collecting is as a kid, watch on Tillman Island, walking shorelines, and started finding stuff and didn't know how old it was. And one thing led to another, and I did some research and met a lot of folks, and they shared their information. And that's how I got interested in archaeology and Delmarva's prehistory primarily. It's important for folks to know that a lot of this stuff is vanishing, that is eroding away into the Chesapeake Bay. And more importantly, with respect to people, avocational archaeologists, ones that are interested in the past, that are out there 24/7, 365 looking along shorelines, is the value of keeping things, keeping notes, documenting where you're finding stuff, so that, you know, for future generations, you can have a documentary record of where things were found. And they can tell archaeologists, you know, oh wow, somebody was on this landscape 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, or whatever. Humans have been on this landscape for a long time, and the landscape that they were on has changed radically. The climate's changed, the sea levels have risen, and I think that that's kind of interesting because, you know, humans typically resist change, and when you look at these collections, you realize that, you know, 13,000 years ago there were mammoths and mastodons, and, you know, 8,000 years ago there were coniferous forests here, and then, you know, today we have oysters, crabs, clams, and fish.
99% of all my artifacts have been found on the shoreline or overboard, and in fact, over the years I've dredged in places where I was standing in waist-deep water. So when you really stop and think about, I'm actually pulling things out that would never be seen and preserving them for folks like these people today to come take a look at and talk about. I sort of look at that as I'm nothing more than the caretaker of those artifacts right now.
It's human nature to covet things that you're not familiar with and desire. And the people in the Ohio Valley, say 2,000 years ago, really loved marine shells. Why? Because the Ohio Valley doesn't have any marine shells. At this particular moment in time, the Ohio Valley wanted some of this stuff. We had the source for it. People met somewhere, trade and exchange. We end up with bling, they end up with bling, everybody's happy. Stuff from here ends up in mounds, stuff from there ends up in dunes along the Choptank River.
They can't figure out why they were walked here 2,500 years ago from Ohio. They originated in Ohio. They were walked here 2,500 years ago. They cannot figure that out. My collection here is the Sandy Hill collection, and it was all found in 1927 by Roy Travis. It's a Dana collection, and it was originally come from Ohio. They were building a seawall in 1927. They were using the sand to mix with the cement dust and plus making roads with it. And 27 feet below the top of the surface, they struck 100 caches of these exotic artifacts. The first collection was found in 1927. The second collection was found in 1947. It's about 2,500 years old. It's all ceremonial pieces. They were never used for everyday things, only for ceremonial. Every piece was used in a ceremony, and it was buried in a mound of sand in Cambridge, Maryland. I don't think they were traded. They were walked here for a purpose. They were buried in caches. They were only used for each piece is a ceremonial piece. It was not used for everyday people. They were the leaders of their culture of their nations. It was never intended for local, everyday folks.
There's an ethical quandary among archaeology, professional archaeology, and avocational things. One, people say, oh, you shouldn't pick this stuff up. Now, I basically have a series of trays here that document, you know, there are 40 trays covering the entire prehistory. Now, I could have left those along the shorelines. I could have left those right there, And would they provide any insights in the past today if I had practiced a purist archaeological perspective and said, okay, when you find something, leave it there. And with respect to Poplar Island, all the stuff that I have for Poplar Island would be underneath dredge spoils. So what benefit would it serve, people interested in the past, people interested in history, if you had left it there? My own personal standpoint is that it can tell you if you're going to take enough time to spend weeks and hours and days and months walking shorelines or walking fields, you should equally take enough time to record and document the stuff so that future generations can have a record.
These are not grave pieces. These are pieces they buried in the ground. There were no bones, bodies, or anything found with these pieces. I think the pieces should be left for the general public to see them, and scholars in the future should have a chance to study this stone workmanship these stone masters crafted 2,500 years ago. I hope this collection ends up somewhere where people can really come see it, the everyday person like yourself or me or my grandson can come look at this collection in the future. 100 years from now, I want them to come see it. It's a fabulous collection. You'll never see nothing like that again in your lifetime. It's a magnificent testament to the stone masters that the original real Americans did. And it's considered one of the top 3 collections in America, and it's the top collection in private hands.
And periodically people bring out their fancy stuff, so that's probably what they, or during special occasions, they yank it out, show it off. Everybody goes, ooh, ah, and then they shove it back in and hide it for a while. Kind of like what we're doing today.
I think the thing for me that's so amazing about collecting artifacts is the connection I have to the past. If you think about picking up an artifact that's 6, 8, 10,000 years old, you're basically, in many cases, the first person that's touched that, since that person, who was nothing like me, dropped it, left it, discarded it. It basically connects me to that person. So many times when I pick that artifact up and put it in my hand, I feel like it's connecting me to an individual that was part of my history here on the Delmarva Peninsula, and an individual that was nothing like me. So that is the connection I find, the cultural connection to artifact hunting.
When I was a kid, I used to walk shorelines of Poplar Island. And I recorded about 8 or 10 sites on archaeological sites, both historic and prehistoric on Poplar Island. And I had plotted every site, took tons of photographs, recorded eroded shorelines, what they look like. I kept all the, not just the good points or the good pieces of ceramics, I kept everything and I separated it. And today, Poplar Island is underneath of a pile of dredge spoils. So at this moment, the only extant record of human occupation of Poplar Island is pretty much in my house.
I've certainly got a lot of arrowheads or points, spear knives, or spear points and knives. A particular attraction to me is a shell necklace that I found about 25 years ago in the lower part of Dorchester County, a necklace that probably came from the Atlantic seacoast somewhere, even down south some toward Georgia, but somehow ended up here in Dorchester County. It's a very rare piece, and that's one of my favorite finds.
There's one collection here, and it originated from a site about 8 miles south of Ocean City on the Atlantic seashore, and it's about the assemblage. The artifacts tell me that somebody's living there 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. And these folks were clearly migrating down from western New York, down the Susquehanna, down the main trunk of the Chesapeake, going across the lower peninsula to the Atlantic seashore for the sole purpose of getting seashells to make ornaments. Now, ironically, all of this stuff that's found at this one site is identical to materials found in western New York State. It's the same time period. That's a long ways away. More importantly, with showing me that things just really don't change is the day that we found that site. It was a cold winter day, and we went into Ocean City and got behind a stoplight, and I looked ahead of me and I saw a license plate and it said New York State, and I'm like, damn, some things just don't change. Those people from New York are still coming down here to the ocean, probably getting seashells. Some things change a lot, but some things don't.
The Smithsonian, people from the Smithsonian looked at it. Darren Lowry has had a lot of professors from different universities come look at my collection from all over the East Coast, and they say it's one of the top collections they've ever handled and looked at. They cannot figure out why they come here. They have no clue why they brought them here. They have some of these Adena Mound in West Virginia. I think there are some in Delaware. I think they just started working their way this away, but they have never found this huge amount of artifacts in one place anywhere, except this is the biggest collection of Adena artifacts that's ever been found. The other places they find artifacts is very few. It was over 600 pieces were found at that one time at this Sandy Hill collection.
People in the future can use these collections for education and interpretation so that folks can appreciate, what they have. So I just think that's kind of interesting and important, and it's vanishing and it's disappearing. There's very little research been focused on these things, but what little research tells you that we have a rich archaeological heritage here.
My wife bought me a book on Indian axes, Midwest axes. So I started collecting Indian Midwest axes. I had one of the top collections of Midwest axes in the country. And I heard that this collection was for sale. I sold my axe collection off and bought this collection, my stone axes. And I've never regretted doing it because I truly believe that this should come back to the Eastern Shore, and it's going to stay on the Eastern Shore. I hope it does some way.
I've also found a large amount of pentagonal artifacts, which they're called Jack's Reef artifacts, and they're also unusual, and I found several of those in the area as well. So those are some of my favorites. Yeah.
Yes, I have a favorite piece. Yes. It's one of my bigger blades. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, but I like it all. But I thoroughly enjoy other people looking at it. It's no fun having a collection you can't share it with someone else.
I mean, that's pretty exotic stuff, and obviously it was meant to be it was special stuff, and it was meant to be taken out and show. It's kind of like, bring it all out of their house, show all of our fancy prehistoric archaeological bling, and then it disappears, tomorrow.